So if we have come in search of the Maccabees, the first thing we want to try to do to locate them is identify where is their hometown. Well, fortunately, the book of Maccabees tells us exactly where they're from. It says in the book of Maccabees that Matityahu, which happens to be my Hebrew name, so I'm very partial to this holiday, as you can imagine. The priest Matityahu moves his family from Jerusalem to a place called Modi'in. So I looked at the map of Israel, and luckily we have a Modi'in today. And that's what is right behind me. These are the outskirts of the town of Modi'in. But you should say, wait a second. We're not talking about modern Modi'in. We're talking about ancient Modi'in. So that's why I've come to the outskirts of the town. Because in some excavations about 10 years ago, they started to find the remains of a place which very well could be ancient Modi'in. So if you follow me around, just as we turn around here, you will see the beginning of a path that's going to lead us to what it calls a Jewish village from the Second Temple period. Perfect, because that's exactly what we're looking for. The name of this archaeological site is called Umdan. Let's go and explore what it has to offer, and we'll see whether or not this might have been ancient Modi'in. So you followed me down the path, and we're getting to parts of the ancient town. This is actually a pretty cool looking ruin. It's part of an ancient wine press. And if you follow me in here, come on, follow me a little bit. You get to the beautiful mosaics of the floor where you'd have crushed the grapes. The juice would have run down through into these pits here where you're able to sift it and get the actual good stuff out of it. But let's keep going, because this doesn't tell us whether or not this was a Jewish town. This doesn't tell us whether or not Matityahu and his sons lived here. For that, we have to go towards the other part of the site. So follow me, let's go. So what's the telltale sign of a Jewish town, a Jewish village? A mikveh. And what do you know? They happen to find some mikvahot here at Umdan. And that's where we are right now. If I walk down into the mikveh, you'll see that it's same type of mikveh as what we use today. So here I am walking down into a mikveh from ancient Modi'in. Could this be one of the ones that Matityahu and his sons used? Why not? Now today, in the year 2020, if you want to go to the mikveh, you're probably going to go towards your synagogue, because that's where they're attached. Well, guess what? Even back 2,000 years ago, the mikveh happens to be right next to the synagogue. And this synagogue that I'm standing in right now is from the Talmudic period. We're talking about the time of 1,600 years ago. Now, in and of itself, that is not amazing, because we have hundreds of those all over Israel. What's really amazing, and what connects us to the Hanukkah story, is what they found underneath the Talmudic layer here. Now, there's several layers to this building. What we have ultimately is some type of public building. But we have layers going back to the time of Antiochus III and Antiochus IV. You'll remember the fourth being the villain of the Hanukkah story. On top of that, there's another layer of some type of building, which you see here, which I'll tell you about in a moment. The most recent layer that we had was a synagogue from the Talmudic period. The real key to this site is that layer that's between the time of Antiochus and the time of the Talmudic period. And what they found underneath was another synagogue, another layer of synagogue from the time of before the destruction of the Second Temple. The layer of this synagogue that they found here goes back to the time of the Hasmoneans, of the Maccabees, of Matityahu and its sons. So when we talk about in the book of Maccabees, with the outbreak of the revolt that led to the Hanukkah story, the discussions for this revolt, the discussions for the outbreak of this probably took place in this very synagogue where we're sitting. This place is the origins of the Hanukkah story. So not only do we have here the oldest synagogue ever found in Israel, This synagogue goes back to the time of the Hasmoneans, the heroes of the Hanukkah story. When Antiochus IV made his decrees, most Jews accepted it. The Maccabees, led by Matityahu and his sons, they were the exceptions. And there's going to be a showdown between the Hellenists, those who accepted the decrees, and Matityahu and his sons right here in Modi'in. And what happens is that one of the generals, the Greek generals, arrives here, pulls Matityahu aside as one of the leaders of the town and says, "Here, go and worship that idol." Matityahu refuses. But another Hellenized Jew says, "I'll do it." He rushes forward. He bows down to the idol. Matityahu sees this, takes his sword, slays that Jew, and calls out the famous cry, "Mi L'Hashem Elai," whoever's for God, come to me. And he and his sons head to the hills over here. And we have the beginnings of the revolt.
Pain we learned so long ago. Light one candle for all we believe in. Let anger not tear us apart. Light one candle to bind us together with pieces of song in our heart. Don't let the light go out.
So let's go back to our original question. How do we know that this was a hometown of the Maccabees?